This story contains fantasy violence. And worms do not destroy. Part 6: The King.
Above them, a row of vaulted windows leaked a sickly sun. A dozen or so empty gazes turned to the newcomers. The sallow light encouraged squinting. "And you've all been simply waiting here?" Yof asked the wizened men and women crouched in a row, their backs pressed awkwardly to the wall. The rich Newell-born voice echoed in the expanse of the great hall. The supplicants winced and waited for the comfort of the deep silence to return. "Every single one of you?" asked Wedit, disturbing the quiet again. "For how long?" pressed Yof. The oldest in line, the one at the head, answered first. His skin bubbled with ruptured tissue.
"Since 18, I was..."
He answered between the unpleasant smacks of his gums.
5 years now.
Said another in line, closer to the double doors.
3 years.
10 years. 10 years.
2.
The myriad of years overlapped in a jumble, its volume waking the last person in the row, the one nearest the impossibly tall doors. She jumped out of sleep and bellowed,
Oh my life.
She looked down the line. She folded her arms, seeing others had skipped ahead of her. She pouted, but was too weak to intervene. Her head fell back against the wall, and she returned to her awkward slumber. "And you?" Wedit asked one of the supplicants. "What have you done? I mean, before this? Farmer? Warrior? What?" The man didn't bother to part the long hair covering his face. He reached up under it and stroked his chin in contemplation.
I don't think I've done much of anything. Besides wait.
He decided. Yof and Wedit turned away from the supplicants and peered together into the wide-open hall, its limits obscured by a thick and foul pollution. The dense vapor stretched quite near the wizened men and women. Its gentle swirl floated down and settled over the violet carpet that flowed away from the waiting line, quickly vanishing into the hall's unknowable center. Then a rustle of metal drew the brothers' attention. On their right, a column of the vapor parted, and a nearby alcove appeared. The soldiers of a truncated phalanx busied themselves beneath a curtained ceiling, donning their armor, aided by an equal number of young servants. Wedit grinned. He eyed the somber soldiers and their shining silver breastplates with booming expectations. He nodded gleefully. Yes, they dressed for war. Wedit looked back to the rank of old men and women behind him. He disdainfully marked their frail chests, rod-thin arms, and sunken cheeks. Before he could stop himself, he spat on the floor. Walking over to the phalanx with pride, Wedit stood before the warriors, knuckles on hips. The soldiers were nearly as tall as he. "Do you march west?" he asked, excited. His eyes beamed. But no one looked at him. They continued to dress and prepare, their eyes downcast, their mood sullen. "When will the Blessed Immortal King come to his hall?" Wedit asked them. A woman, half-armored and holding her arms out, cast a deep look at the newborn, but said nothing. When their eyes met, the soldier looked away and refocused on her fitting. Wedit returned to his brother's side, summoned by a gruff gesture. Yof and Wedit stood shoulder to shoulder. They gazed into the pollution that obscured the hall. "Shall we?" whispered Yof, nodding into the vapor. "Well, I ain't waiting like those raggedy bones," answered Wedit, sneering at the line of sleepers along the wall. Yof stole an inquisitive glance to his left, frowning at those waiting. Wedit called out to the phalanx on his right, though the soldiers were once again hidden from view. "Chin up, warriors!" He kissed his biceps and his axe. "The king will soon add me and my 3 pillars to your number. Then you will be unstoppable." The brothers stepped forward. The echo of Wedit's declaration followed them. "Then you will be unstoppable, 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 unstoppable."
But wait,
A supplicant called, her plea barely audible.
you have to join the line. You aren't allowed to just...
But the sons of Newell never heard her woeful cry, for they had already disappeared into the whirl of pollution. Only their chilled breath sounded against those minster walls. They otherwise walked through that misty veil in silence for a long time, the lush carpet dulling their heavy footfalls. Finally, Wedit filled the uncanny emptiness when he said, "It is too cold in the land of kings." Their icy exhales mixed with the choking pollution. after an hour, both Wedit and Yof grew accustomed to breathing in the vapor. When the pollution thinned and became a mist, the brothers discovered they now approached a wide stair. And atop that stair, murky and concealed, the throne of the Blessed Immortal King. The bottom of the throne rose above their heads. Its shape mimicked an angry basilisk, and the back of the stone reptile towered high up into the haze. The throne's extended claws formed the arms of the throne. Those claws curled back into the beast's shoulders, and the shoulders slanted up to shape the taut neck. From this curl of stone jutted a head and snout, chiseled into unwavering scorn. The reptile's oversized lap spread out in gold and crystal, a rococo delight. When the vapor floated past and obscured the stair, one could believe that beastly throne simply perched in midair, the seat of power. A marvel. Yof and Wedit stood amazed. Although an unmoving darkness told them the king sat in authority at the center of the basilisk, the shifting pollution continued to shield that body. The brothers could see very little of their monarch. His armor was rich with adornment and etched with forgotten tales, but the grandeur was smoky, desultory, and ancient. He seemed more alike to the basilisk displayed beneath him than to the men standing below. Static in anger, not alive with curiosity. Between the king's segmented knees and around his steel calves, there curled a long imperious gown. It skulked down the fat stair and flowed toward the brothers like a deep lilac waterfall. They both realized it was the other end of the carpet they had followed through the hazy mystery of the great hall. The sight gave Wedit pause. Surely I knew his martial prowess would slack my jaw. But this, he bumbled. Yof felt his mind cloud over. I suspected he would be beyond my understanding. But such wonder. He bumbled too. Yof took a final step forward, unstrapped his bow, laid it before the stair. Yof knelt low. Wedit tried to pierce the vapor with searching eyes. He wanted to look upon the king's stately brow, meet his powerful gaze. But Wedit was not up to the task. He uneasily set his axe down beside his brother's weapon. The blade bellowed a nervous echo as Wedit cautiously bowed his head. He stole one final look before his brother recited their supplication. Blessed Immortal King, started Yof, but he hesitated, distracted by the trail of his own voice, as it resounded in that inscrutable, majestic space. Blessed Immortal King, immortal, blessed, immortal. Immortal King. He cleared his throat and continued. We have come north through 5. He stopped again. He counted. Through 10. He shifted his weight. 12. He took his long beard in his hand, as though he might count the strands and find the proper sum of years allotted there. Through many tribulations, Yof decided. And now we beseech. He faltered again. Was his declaration no longer suitable? Was every word a betrayal? Yof felt like the goat on the altar. Blessed King, we have north, 10, many tribulations and now. The echo of Yof's own words doubled back and caught him. Rebounding without meaning, they pressed around him, smothered him, insisted he remain mute. Wedit stood up. He stood up and staggered forward onto the wide stair. With ever-growing astonishment, Yof lifted his eyes to see his brother rise up into the vapor and approach the throne, one steady step at a time. Wedit! Yof hissed. But his brother ignored him, already halfway inside the pollution. Yof braced as Wedit lifted a trembling hand. He could barely see his brother reach out to the impenetrable face of the Blessed Immortal King. One dark likeness merged into another. The basilisk took a new shape. With a peculiar wail shrill like a dying lament, the vapor enveloped the newly-born sun. Yof lowered his eyes. He blinked at his bow on the floor, surprised. Wedit's axe was not there. Yof could not breathe, his forehead drenched in new sweat. His eyes darted up into the vapor. Wedit's voice howled. The basilisk rumbled. Yof felt his bones rattle. He thought they might shatter. A crown fell. It rolled down the stair and over the lilac robe. It smacked Yof's bow, then clambered in a tight circle. Finally, it came to rest. Yof lifted a hand toward the crown, but dared not touch it, though it lay so near. It flashed in jeweled splendor, then went dim. Wedit's voice issued again from the dread oblivion. It's empty, 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 he said. Empty. Yof lifted his head to see Wedit step down. His brother's face emerged from the thick vapor. Although the haze still clung to him, Yof could see Wedit's cheeks were streaked with tears. The brothers tripped forward and nearly toppled out of the pollution. They leaned on one another as they stumbled toward the line of supplicants. Those still awake turned foul when they saw Wedit's tears.
No use crying about it,
said the first man in line. It's the haze, offered Wedit. Burns my eyes. He looked away.
of course.
Said the old man, dulling his hostility. Wedit thought of the alcove and pulled away from Yof. He briskly ran toward the soldiers. He found the phalanx fully armored and at the ready. Their beak-like helmets aimed toward the large double doors of the entrance hall. Wedit shouted, "Go, leave, flee, to Stein and Skirt. There at least you will have satisfaction. Though I must report, all pleasure is fleeting and all befuddlement everlasting." The phalanx did not move. Wedit was irritated. "There is no king," he cried. The head of the phalanx turned to him.
"We know,"
said the soldier. Wedit blinked in reply. Yof waded into the line of supplicants. He whispered to them, "No king sits on the throne. Do you hear? Take your leave. Return to your families." He looked from face to face, frustrated by their idleness. The old woman who had lost her place awoke again. She lifted her tired eyes and mumbled,
We know.
The brothers backed away, one from the old, one from the young. Together they neared the entrance of the audience hall. Yof pulled hard on the left door's giant ring. A greenish light crept along the floor. Wedit pulled hard on a second giant ring. And the light of day splashed across both their faces. The minister stood just outside, waiting, her back to the brothers. The Ged spread out before her in a wide spill of people, each buying and selling, drinking and eating, loving and hating, living and dying, all of them unaware of the theatrics within. The minister turned around slowly, and the sun crested her high, fancy collar. The brothers stared at her, waiting for some unguessed revelation. The minister met their dumbfounded gawp and grinned. Wedit and Yof took a step out of the hall past the minister. They returned to the bustle of flesh and bone. Wedit soon realized he descended the stairs alone. He spun backward to find Yof still at the top, frozen. Yof's eyes twitched. His hands clenched again and again. He wanted to shout. Wedit returned to his brother's side, just as the phalanx exited the hall and trudged down the steps in single file. Yof, Wedit whispered, there was no one to beseech, so there is no one to serve. He watched the jangle of armor pass beside them. So who commands these? Yof did not respond, and the pair of them listened to the discordant metal for a time. Wedit continued, we are lost, brother. Let us wander now, like leaves on the wind. An absent king speaks no decree. At that, Yof flicked his eyes to Wedit. He prodded his brother's blank expression in vain, then turned and considered the marching phalanx once more. But the babble of their king's aegis held no answer. Yof said, go, brother, if that is what you wish. Find the end of your days in the wild, serving only belly and loin. As for me, he lifted his head into a new breeze. The chilly air felt good when it reddened his cheeks. Renewed, he eyed the phalanx with determination. Yof reached for his wolf blanket. Slung over his shoulder like a shawl, he handed it to Wedit. Give this to your son, he said, should you meet him on the road. Yof blinked. A tingle ran down his left side. He unbuttoned his tunic. The Gwilsey wound was healed. Wedit steadied his axe as the last soldier stepped down into the ged. He rightly guessed what his brother was about to do. Yof cradled his bow in his hands. My power is not your equal, but it is mine to offer. He nodded at the march of men and women. Those shall I now call brother and sister. Yof slung his bow over his shoulder and cupped a hand about Wedit's neck. Farewell, he said, holding steady his brother's gaze. The youngest newelborn trotted after the soldiers and joined the end of their line. They went west. Wedit grunted, shouldering the wolf blanket. When the warriors were a smudge on the horizon, far from the ged, he spat. He lifted his axe, and with a slackened posture, Wedit took his first step toward home. His stomach grumbled. Wedit was hungry. The broken walkway no longer connected his home to the King's Road, and his house, once a fine building, had toppled. Now its fragments leaned upon a small hill of earth, and atop that hill grew a gnarled tree. Wedit let the wolf blanket go. Wedit stood at the waterfall, looking at the sump. Wedit tried to remember. He looked back at the tree, then the rubble. Wedit heard a light fluttering sound. Daring to search, he returned to the ruin and discovered a piece of green fabric, half under a short pile of stone, wiggling in the wind. He pulled it free and sat on the ground. His knees cracked. He spread the cloth before him. Wedit reached into his tunic. He brought out the other half of the torn banner and laid it on the ground. He completed the picture. Wedit sat on his haunches, shivering. A low groan escaped him. He pulled his body away from the rock and wood, undressing as he crept low upon the earth. A trail of clothes in his wake, the naked Wedit slid on his belly in short spasms. As he grumbled away, the dirt and mud slicked his body. Wedit lost his tenuous grip again and again. He flopped and turned over and back. The day's long shadows stretched and turned, stroking over the land as Wedit led his weapon to the edge of the sump. By the time he reached it, Wedit was as grimy as the pit itself. He dipped the blade in the brackish cesspool. He loosened his grip and let the axe slip away into the oil. He turned his head back to the ruins once more, then followed his weapon into nothing. Wedit slithered into the black pool. Sinking, he muttered,
World will not win, but it will never die. The world is full of worms.
When the oil filled him, Wedit was gone. He could see the waterfall in full power. He could see the house with imposing walls. He could see the slate walkway properly aligned. The black ink in the sump recoiled from the yellow lichen. The plant grew apace, its thin strip of life not ready to surrender.
And Worms Do Not Destroy, starring Steve Rudolph as Wedit, Yof, and the narrator, featuring Julia Eve as the Minister, AJ Beckles, Sarah Golding, and Owen McCuen as Ensemble. Written and produced by William J. Meyer. This concludes And Worms Do Not Destroy. Thank you for listening.